Channel?
That on the channel, that thing that people talk about that sound interesting or good but don't really mean anything. Let's just, again, keep it simple. Think about not only the short term, but let's make sure that we're looking at long-term impact, long-term value. So while you're developing your strategy and your thinking and your plans for short-term revenue gains, don't ever take the eye off the ball in terms of long-term. Develop at least a 2 to 3 year plan to get there with different milestones and different ways of understanding the impact at those different milestones.
Carl Fremont is the CEO of Quigley-Simpson and the guy who's seen every marketing fad die, resurrect, and rebrand itself faster than Elon Musk can tweet regrets. He's here to tell you AI isn't your new CMO, and yes, folks, you might still have to actually understand your customers. Shocking concept, I know. Let's dig in.
Eric Troutman, the czar of the TCPA, isn't just the guy you call when your phone rings too much. He's the guy you must call. Need to navigate the legal minefield of robocalls, texts, and telemarketing nightmares? Troutman doesn't just give you advice. He hands you a roadmap, a compass, and a do not press this button sign. Practical? Yes. Actionable? Absolutely. And if you're not calling him first, let's be honest, you're probably making a mistake.
Welcome to the ADOTAT Show. I'm Pesach Latin, your host, the guy who's been at tech so long. I remember when cookies were just for eating. Today I've got Carl Fremont, CEO of Quigley-Simpson, with me, a marketing mastermind who's seen every trend come, go, and come back again with a new buzzword. If marketing were a circus, Carl's the guy taming the lines while the rest of us are still trying to find the ox guard. Let's get into it. First of all, Carl, how are you doing? Let's skip the press release. No one's here for the greatest hits album.
Great, thank you. Every year I look at it as a new venture, a new opportunity. Every year I get more and more excited about our industry, advancements that are being made, and moving ourselves forward. So despite some of the political and things that are happening in LA right now, I think we're poised for a great year ahead.
So you're known for looking back to look forward, which sounds like the marketing version of walking back into the future with one eye on a Fitbit. You've been through every ad tech revolution from Mad Men era to CRM, today's AI overlords. Let's talk about the past whispers, what the past whispers to you, while the rest of us are drowning in Slack notifications and programming jargon. Are you saying today's marketing is just a more expensive version of yesterday's persuasive game? Are we all just overcomplicating things with acronyms, dashboards, and tech that only interns seem to operate?
It's a great question, and I love the acronym soup, and I'm guilty too of playing that game of acronym soup. But at the end of the day, Pesach, we all know that marketing principles have been around for decades and decades. It's all about driving sales, driving revenue, and creating profitable returns. And that's what it's always been around and always been about. So if we keep to that as our mission around using marketing in order to drive sales, revenue, profit, then it's just how do we enhance it through new technology, through access of data, to be smarter and quicker about what we're doing. Pesach, I can't hear you.
Sorry. When we talk about marketing is enhanced, are we talking about a little Botox for marketing?
I like that. I think fortunately I don't need any, but myself. But it is boosting, yes. I mean, so the principles, as I said, of marketing really haven't changed, but having access to more data than we ever had, having advancements in technology, allowing us to interpret that data, make sense of that data, and use it to drive strategy is really at an exciting point because we can be much smarter, more personal, more relevant is a key issue. It's not even about personalization, it's about relevancy to enhance marketing to drive better outcomes, to buy general.
You're gonna see me shine, 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 walking on beams of light, 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 light. You're gonna see me shine, 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 shine. I can't help myself, no, no. Blue skies, no dark clouds, nothing in my...
You know, example of where marketing worked better in the past than it did now? And you can't say jingles unless you have a really good one in your head.
Yeah, I mean, we always need to remember to keep marketing simple. It's so easy to make it complex. And it's all because of what I just said about the advancements in technology, the plethora of data we have, use of data. But if we remember that at the heart of this, it's about the consumer. It's about the consumer wants and needs and desires. Everything else that we use and leverage is to address those needs of the consumer. And sometimes I believe we get so wrapped up into the technology that we forget, and the acronyms, as you said, that we forget at the end of the day that it's not just a switch you push and pull. It's about understanding consumers, what's relevant to them, and providing products, services, messaging to get them to engage, to consider, engage, and buy. It's really a simple premise.
Is there any tool from, let's say, 1985 that you'd like to use today with a current tool?
I believe that what we used in the earlier days. There were some early dashboards that we used. All that was helpful to look at things in real time. But I almost like to, and I tell my team to go back to those simple rules of marketing, of engagement, of looking at how you're along the whole consumer experience consideration journey, how you're connecting with them. Like, take a step back, forget the technology for a moment. The tools we use were, a lot of it was common sense, to be honest. And we looked at a consumer experience and journey that they took to buy a product and service and said, now how do we engage with them, not be disruptive, but be relevant? And that created the impetus for them to consider, shop, and buy. So I think that taking a look back at some of those core principles of understanding consumer attitudes and behaviors and applying it today, of course, enhanced and using technology is part of it, but let's remember the simple ways of how we thought about marketing and engaging with consumers, getting to understand them and getting to use them and getting to engage with them.
So let's be honest, what is one thing you think the industry worships today that future marketers will laugh about, kind of like we laugh at MySpace?
Yeah, you know what? And again, it's not about technology. I think that what I see often, and it's somewhat discouraging, is there's such a focus on short-term goals. There's such a focus on immediacy and driving short-term revenue. And I completely understand that, but it's got to be balanced. You need to look at the long term and what it takes to build a brand. The other thing, going back to your last question about tools, I don't see us looking at real consumer value like we used to. What is the long-term lifetime value of a consumer? How does that play in with driving not only the short-term goals you have, but the long-term? So looking back, I hope that everyone looks back and says, why are we so maniacally focused only on the short term, only on the short-term revenue goals without building business for the longer term? What will that take? What investments are needed? And how do we deploy that? It's not new. We've done this always in the past. So I'd like us to have a better balance between the short-term and long-term, achieving revenue goals.
Does anyone talk about brand loyalty anymore? It seems like everybody is like the TikTok generation. TikTok's may be banned and nobody's protesting it. So where is the brand loyalty?
Yeah, I agree with you. We need to build sustainable brands that people connect with, that they have an affinity to. And I think some of that has gone to the wayside with this short-term view. So what happens is, if you're not building, and this is what Quigley-Simpson strongly believes, it's our proposition, that unless you build a brand affinity, it's not even about awareness, it's about a brand affinity that you have. Unless you build that and sustain it, you're going to hit a proverbial wall of diminishing return, because you're just going to get just those customers who might be consumers who are interested in being impulsive and having an offer in front of them. But if you want long-term sustainable growth and profit, then you have to focus on driving long-term value. What drives long-term value is a brand that consumers, that people, you and I, associate with and feel very strongly about.
Well, speaking of looking at the future, let's talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, because nothing says marketing evolution like handing the key to Skynet. A lot of people are saying AI is the Beyonce of marketing ads. It does everything. Everyone loves it, but deep down, we're all wondering if it's about to outshine us completely. You've been very vocal about balancing AI with human insight.
Yeah.
So
and
I want to ask the question, sorry. What's one way AI is truly leveling up marketing, and what's one way it's just making us lazier?
It's a great question. And actually, I do think about that quite a bit. But one thing is we know is that AI is not new. Artificial intelligence, machine learning has been around for decades. It's interesting that it's getting so much attention and buzz and acronyms being used for it, but it's been around for quite a while and incorporated in tools we use and how consumers engage with brands and products. So none of that is really new. My strong belief is that artificial intelligence, machine learning, generative AI, and applied AI can be very beneficial in terms of analyzing large volumes of data, large data sets, unstructured, structured data, and making some sense of it and putting it together in an order that humans can interpret, can analyze, and to develop strategy off of. I never want to see, in my opinion, an AI tool used to develop marketing strategy. That's the lazy part. We need to have our hands touching the data. We need to really understand it. But there's, as I said at the very beginning, Pesach, there's so much data now more than ever. With technology, there's been always this interplay between technology and creation of data. You brought up Fitbit at the very beginning. That was one of the earlier products that gave us so much data at our fingertips about consumer health and consumer behavior, exercise. But there's so much data that we need AI to help us analyze it. But then humans must touch it so that we can interpret it and we can drive strategy from it.
Can you share a time where AI surprised you in a good or a bad way? Maybe it nailed a campaign insight or turned your pizza into a Picasso.
Well, that's good. One big use we used it for is to determine test markets. And it's a long process of looking at many variables to determine the best markets to test, create control around. And you can spend a great amount of time analyzing the data. So what we did is we did concurrently use an AI tool to help us in selection of test markets, but we also wanted to simultaneously run our own analysis on the best test markets that would be. And looking at it side by side, we saw that they were comparable, that the same inputs and then the outcomes from that, from what we did manually versus AI, were pretty similar. That gives us confidence to say that AI can help us greatly in terms of time efficiency so that we can spend the time on what is then the way to approach the test markets rather than what are those test markets.
So if you gave AI free reign over your marketing budget, let's say $1 million, where would it first spend and where would it mess up?
That's a good question, and we do use AI tools for that, but we check them.
Right. Has it ever accidentally bought an NFT sponsorship?
No, it hasn't. And basically, as we all know, it's based on the data and based on the inputs. So if you've got really good inputs of data, then you're going to have a good decisioning, a good output from it. It's when you don't. So you need to ensure, first thing, when you're using an AI tool for budget allocation or for channel allocation, what data are you feeding into it? What data are you using? If you don't, you're going to have, no matter how good artificial intelligence is, it's driven by the data you have. So you need to ensure that it's being fed the right data.
So AI personalization is part of the craze right now. So where's the line between thoughtful and creepy? For example, we noticed you bought socks. Would you like a mortuary ad next?
It's first of all, I love personalization. Not for marketing, but for me.
I thought you were going to say socks, but okay.
Well, I do like socks too. But you know what? I buy a lot through feeds in my social media and other feeds. And
Right.
it is based on my behavior and what I bought in the past. And I actually probably buy too much based on it because it's so simple. So I believe strongly that if you're using the data correctly, it could drive greater performance. Now, we all know, Pesach, that personalization is not new. You know, I was practicing it 30 plus years ago in classic direct mail, in classic direct marketing. And we called it then RFM, recency, frequency, and monetary value. So this has been used for decades, the personalization. Again, it's data, the access to data and the interpretation of the data, the technology, which is allowing that personalization and customization to be more specific. So where it gets creepy is it all goes back to the data that you're using and the interpretation of it. And that's where it also gets back to the human touch. Because if you're using AI alone to drive that decisioning and without a human view on it, you could wind up in inappropriate, creepy, as you said, ads. So you have to set the rules for the personalization. It's really critical. And you need to examine the behavior, that what the data is telling you, and set the rules for how you're going about personalizing ads.
So if you could create the 10 commandments of AI marketing, what would be the first rule?
Honor your mother and father. No, I'm sorry.
I have thou shalt not create cringeworthy chatbots.
I would say that one of the first things is to make sure that you are reviewing the outputs of the AI and that don't take AI at face value alone. So thou shalt not use AI alone.
So from robots to humans, I want to talk about leadership and what really takes to build a team in the ever chaotic world of marketing. You're known for your high EQ and performance-driven cultures. So how do you lead a team without losing your mind and, frankly, your budget?
You know, it gets challenging. It's something I love. I love leading and I love leading teams and driving thought leadership. I always encourage people to be curious, never stop learning. And that is some of the concerns about technology is that you rely too much on it and you're not curious enough and you're not learning. I think it's really important for all leaders to set a North Star, to set the vision of where you're going, but bring everybody along with you on that to help to have your teams shape that. So they're taking an active role in the roadmap for how you're getting to that North Star, how you're building that vision. I don't believe that just dictating what people need to do is going to solve anything, especially today when younger people are more savvy about technology. They want to have a voice in it. So make sure that you're being inclusive. So for me, inclusivity is not just about diversity of people. It's about diversity of thought. It's about inclusiveness of people in the process.
Okay, so you've also been described as a leader who builds teams with high emotional intelligence. Beyond this buzzword, how much of that is just knowing when to buy everyone coffee versus knowing when to call someone out?
You know what? I do buy people coffee, and people who know me.
It works. And donuts.
It does. I actually, and my
That's the one thing I miss about being in an office is daily donuts.
Well, we do bagels in the office. Although I will tell you, that my LA team that's listening to this, they know it. The LA bagels are not. I'm sorry, they're not New York bagels.
Everyone says it's the water. It may be a fiction. Like the pizza's better, the bagels are better because the water comes from upstate New York.
Exactly.
It goes through all that, minerals and stuff get in it. And there's actually a company that actually makes their own water. What is it called? It's a pizza company. I can't remember the name of it. They actually make their own water that's supposed to be like the Brooklyn water to make their dough.
Well, I'm in South Florida right now, and there's a company called Brooklyn Bagels. I'm not doing an ad for Brooklyn Bagels. However,
You know the company.
They bring in water from Brooklyn.
Maybe that's the company I'm thinking of. I read about. Yeah. Maybe it's not a pizza company.
And I will tell you, because I'm a bagel connoisseur, everybody knows me, knows
Good.
I'm a bagel connoisseur, that Brooklyn bagels are good. And I don't know if I bought into their notion of schlepping water from Brooklyn, but they are better. I will tell you that. So in any event, I do think that,
Now I'm hungry and it's a fast day
well, we got a
for
little
me.
time before lunch, but I think I made myself hungry too. In any event, it is also about buying coffee because when you do sit with somebody, you are getting to know them. And so I really enjoy and like that. The people, my recruiters always knew that I always met with candidates outside the office at a coffee shop because I feel it's the best way to get to know somebody is when you lean into them and not being separated by a desk where you're creating a me, you kind of situation. A barrier, leaning into people and getting to know them is really always been important to me.
So imagine your team is a heist crew from Ocean's 11. What role would you be, and who's Danny Ocean?
You know what? When you look at Ocean's 11, what you see there is a leader with a plan, and you see a team that knows their role and knows what their purpose is in the team, and they're coming along together because, as you said, Danny Ocean has set the team's goals, and everyone is following along because they believe in that. They believe in the mission, but they also they know their role in it. They know their contribution and they are participating in it. So leaders need to set the path, but then include everybody along the way because then it drives adoption. And the more people feel that they're connected to it themselves personally and they have a stake in it, they're going to drive more performance because they have a say in it and they have an equity in it.
So what's one piece of advice that you've heard about leadership that you think is
that word. Well, again, I think it goes back to this notion of dictating and telling people what they have to do. And so job descriptions are great and they're important because they set a guidelines for what people need to do and they're important. But you need to sit with your team and go over it and have them participate in it. So if you are just saying, here's your role, here's your job description, and I'll see you in 6 months, you're not going to get the most out of people at all. You need to be together with them in understanding what their role is, helping to shape that role, and understanding their place within the organization.
Speaking of shaping roles, you mentored a lot of people. If your mentees were writing a book together about your memoir, what's the chapter about you? The first chapter titled?
Well, I hope it is such a mensch because, I've always believed, and it's been always a guiding principle to lean into people, to listen, and to help. Because you know what? Everybody at some point in their career, in their life, is going to need support. So you want to make sure that what you do for people will come back to you. And I personally get a lot of satisfaction in supporting people and helping them in their goals. So I've already decided that's going to be on my grave. It's going to say such a mensch. And that's what I hope it says. I hope people will agree.
All right, Carl, you've led campaigns, teams, and probably a few marketing revolutions, but let's strip it down all literally and plop you on a desert island. You don't have Wi-Fi, no Slack channels, and no dashboards. It's just you, the sand, and a bunch of coconuts. Who are your dream castaways, and how are you keeping the whole operation afloat?
Well, wow. Well, I hope it's a nice island and a sunny island and has lots of vegetation. There's a Peanut comic strip.
Well, it has coconuts. You know it has sun, and
Well, it's got it. Yes.
coconuts don't grow in the North Pole.
Hopefully it's a nice Caribbean island. But in any event, there's a Peanuts comic strip that says in order to survive and thrive, you need 3 types of bones. Number 1 is a wishbone. You can all use a little mazel. The next one is a funny bone because humor is important. And the last one is a backbone. So take it from Linus on the Peanuts. I think it's good advice and good advice for all of us to follow. But in any event, when I think about what the question you asked, there are 3 traits that you would need. And this is part of a team building. You need wisdom, intelligence, people who are smarter than you in many ways. So wisdom is important. You need survival skills. Like I said, you need to be able to survive. And then the last one is humor to get you through it. So if I look at those traits, who would that be? So when I look at it from wisdom, I look to a ancient past sage that I've always listened to, which was Hillel. And he would say, breaking it down in its simplest form, do unto others as you want done to you. So I think that having somebody who is able to bring everybody together and support everyone is important. So wisdom is important. Then you need certain survival skills. So I like to eat, if you can tell that. And we talked about bagels before. So, and I like to eat good. So I would want Martha Stewart there because she could take those coconuts and those nuts and berries and actually maybe turn it into something. And she's a strong person, and I think she could really help the team. I don't think she'd be too bossy. I think that, others on the team will set that straight. And then for the other skill around building, you need someone to help you build. So a carpenter is important because you need shelter. A famous person that I've learned who was a carpenter earlier in his life was Harrison Ford. And he was a carpenter, he was a builder. He got into entertainment and into acting a little bit later, but he started out, what I read, I don't know him, as a carpenter. So I would want those skills because he seems to be very adept at. The other person that I would want with me, who's no longer with me, is my father. And my father has had tremendous resiliency. He was a survivor of the show of the Holocaust, and he saw some unimaginable things growing up. And, I'm here and I'm talking to you because of his resilience, his ability to survive, his ability to always see the silver lining, to always see the glass is half full, to always be optimistic and always believe in hope. And that's been a big force in my life. And I've always, talked about that. So having that resiliency and that hope, that's part of not just the wish, but it's part of not just your wishbone, but it's also part of your character, is to always see the silver lining and be optimistic and have hope.
So you mentioned Hillel earlier. What advice do you think he would give when someone went nuts because they had no Wi-Fi? Because let's be honest, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Sounds great, but it doesn't help with coconuts counting.
Well, I hope it would. I would say, and this is advice I give myself, frankly, in situations that are challenging, is really first and foremost, be calm. I think he would say, take a pause, be calm, think about the situation, think about the options, and think about how we all work together and get through it together. So I hope that's what everyone on this desert island would do. It's a philosophy that I drive at my company and my team, that we all work together to solve things. And when you are calmly dissecting issues, I believe you can get the most from it because you're not reacting emotionally. You're taking that away, hard to do, and you're focused on what are the issues at hand and how do we solve for them.
So when the rescue boat, Carl, when the rescue boat arrives, what's the first thing you're doing? And does it involve turning this into a Netflix series?
Well, I think it could be a series. And the other person I forgot to tell you, that I would bring.
With Jerry Seinfeld.
Jerry Seinfeld. So sorry. So I would work on this script with Jerry on the island. And
but wouldn't he just spend the whole time doing like crazy observational humor about the island? Be like, what's the deal with this sand? It's just tiny rocks.
I think it would be great. He always, and I actually did meet him very early in his career. And I saw him at a nightclub in Fort Lee, New Jersey called Bananas. And
I know both, actually, strangely enough.
Really? And I
know Fort Lee.
This goes back, when I was first married, so almost 40 years ago. And I went with my wife, and it was a $5 cover charge to see Jerry Seinfeld. And at the end, I went over, introduced myself. I said how, that he was so funny. And he said, what'd you like about the show? I said, I'm not sure. It was kind of about nothing, but you made it funny. And he talked about that, he finds humor in the simple everyday things. But we would create a script for the show, and I think I would call the show, This Isn't Long Island. I think I would juxtaposition it to Long Island and what Long Island is about. In any
Wait,
event,
I thought it was Long Island.
I
So we
should
got to
bring
say
out
it right.
I should bring out my New York accent. Humor is important. I think that he would be very instrumental as part of the team.
So speaking of diving, I want to go back into diving into the murky waters of measurement, metrics, and the eternal quest for clarity. So here's the simple question. When are we going to get it right? And why are we still fumbling the ball like it's amateur hour?
Well, there's been so much discussion on measurement for every conference I go to, industry conference. Measurement comes in. And it's been that way since I started my career. And frankly, since the early days of advertising. A quick funny anecdote. I saw a telegraph that the Strauss brothers from Abraham and Strauss and Macy's, one of them was on the Titanic. And I saw the telegram. One brother was sending the other when he was on the Titanic and said, how were Christmas sales this year? That was 1911. So he was asking, how do we know what works and what doesn't work? So from the early days, and this was newspapers in 1911, we were trying to figure out how to measure things. This has always been ongoing. And I think there's got to be a balance. There needs to be a balance between what we standardize in measurement and what we customize in measurement. And we need both. And if we look to standardize everything, and brands are not customizing what is important and relevant to them, all about driving revenue, sales revenue, ROI, but what is important and meaningful for them. So we need to, I believe, yes, still talk about what needs to be standardized, but there has to be a point where we take that and then look to what we're customizing for each brand in each situation.
If you had to create a new KPI, what would it be? And can we call it the Stop Wasting My Ad Spend Index?
Yes, absolutely. And it goes back to, I believe, at the end of the day, as I've said, it's all about what's my return on my investment. So if we're always looking at that as our benchmark, what is the ROAS? What is the ROI? And then how do we then assemble the right metrics to measure that? And this is where the customization comes in, because what is right for a consumer packaged goods brand is going to be different than for a high consideration brand like a car or travel. We need to, everything is about, am I getting my return on investment? And it's not always in the short term. Some of it is in the long term. But we then need to see what is most relevant for each brand category in order to measure that return on investment.
So you've worked in financial services, QSR, CPG, and pharma. Which industry do you think is the biggest offender when it comes to bad metrics, and why?
Not necessarily bad metrics. I believe that we need to evolve them. And consumer packaged goods has always looked at media reach and impressions as a barometer. And as we all know, the best tools that we have to measure against impressions are only, they're not always actual. We can't always count in real impressions. They're what we believe exposure is. They're not absolute. So I think we need to evolve from looking at reach and frequency and impressions as a key barometer. And that metric, which we've been using for decades, especially in areas of CPG, need to continue to evolve.
So if you could write the measure playbook for the next decade, what is one rule that you put in there everyone should follow without any exception?
The one rule that everyone needs to follow is first establish what your goals are. What are you truly measuring? What is most important? Again, I believe that return on your spend, return on your investment, but also there's a return on investment, not only in spend, but a return on investment in time. And that's one thing that we probably don't spend enough focus on, is how much of our effort and what is that yielding? And it goes back a little bit to the AI and how we're using AI to streamline and to make things more efficient. because that's the other metric in this that we don't talk about on a continuous basis. Not only what's the return on my spend investment, what's the return on my time investment?
Hey, let's get a little personal. We talk about marketing AI and surviving a desert island. Let's just shine the spotlight directly on you. What drives you and what keeps you up at night? You've mentioned before that Lester Wonderman is your Yoda. What's the one piece of advice he gave you that clearly echoes in your head?
Keep it simple, and I have a copy on my desk that I always keep there of the book that he wrote in 1990 called Being Direct. And there are 19 principles in that book that are up front. And even though he wrote this book 35 years ago, all the principles, what I said at the very beginning, are still the same about marketing. But what I learned from Lester Wonderman and from being at Wonderman as a company, as an agency, is that focus on the consumer always. You're never going to go wrong with that, on what their needs, wants, and desires are. And make it easy, make it simple for somebody to make a choice and make an informed choice. And as we know, that if you complicate it and you have too many choices, this was always a rule of thumb in classic direct-to-consumer, direct marketing, that if you have too many choices, you get inertia. People don't know what to do, and they don't necessarily make a decision. So make it simple and easy for somebody to make an informed decision about your brand.
If you could trade places with one person in the marketing industry for a day, who would it be? And you can't say Don Draper because he's kind of fictional.
Yeah,
a bit
no.
problematic.
Although, he's a put together guy, though. You have to admit that.
The drinking problem.
It's true. I don't want that. But you know what? I've always in my career, I've looked up to people, but I always get different things from different leaders. So I'm sorry to say there's not any one person, because I look at many leaders in our industry from early times. Even I mentioned Abraham Strauss. I think that there's important lessons to be learned from everyone. So what I do, and I encourage others to do, is learn from as many people as you can, and take as much as you can from different people, different leaders at different times.
So you've also seen a lot of trends come and go. If there's one thing you could eliminate from modern marketing, what would it be? And my money, you might be the term synergy you might want to get rid of.
Synergy, maybe even integration could be another one of those.
Omnichannel.
That omnichannel, that thing that people talk about that sound interesting or good but don't really mean anything. Let's just, again, keep it simple. Think about not only the short term, but let's make sure that we're looking at long-term impact, long-term value. So while you're developing your strategy and your thinking and your plans for short-term revenue gains, don't ever take the eye off the ball in terms of long-term. Develop at least a 2 to 3 year plan to get there, with different milestones and different ways of understanding the impact at those different milestones. And what I don't see enough of is that long-term planning. It's quarter to quarter in many cases. So therefore you knee-jerk react, and you don't really have the focus on how you're building your brand and sales for the long term.
So let's imagine you're like at a fancy dinner party and someone comes up to you and asks you what you do for a living. How do you explain what you do without using buzzwords?
We're all asked that, many, many times. I've said I'm in marketing and people go, what is that? So that's not completely understood. So I don't say that anymore. I for those who are not in our business or industry, I usually say advertising because that's what people know. And then I usually get from that, where have I seen your ads? What have you created? They're looking for the big shiny ads. So I really talk more about that. I am in advertising, but I help brands, I help companies build their business for the longer term.
So what's one thing that you want to be remembered in the industry? And if there was an award named after you, what would it be for?
I'll go back to the Mensch, I think
would it be the Mensch AdTech Award or something?
The Mensch AdTech Award. But seriously, that is part of it. But I also believe, and I've guided my career on making an impact. And even we brought that into Quigley-Simpson and our value proposition of being brand focused, brand led, demand, performance driven, and impact obsessed. Because at the end of the day, I want to know that my company and what we do for our business, our clients, we're making an impact on them, but we're also making an impact on their consumers and on people's lives. So I would love the Mensch Impact Award. I'll combine the two.
So you've obviously had a incredible career. If you could give one piece of advice to the next generation of marketers before we go, what would it be?
It's what I always say, and I say it to tell my own kids as well, is just be curious. Learn every day. Every day I keep a pad next to me and I write down, I still write, and I like paper, even though I've been doing digital for 3 decades. What is it that I want to learn? You never stop learning. I've been doing this for 40 years, and I get so excited about where the industry is and where it's going, and there's so much to learn. Be curious and learn on your own. Don't only wait for the company you work for to help you in that regard. Yes, you should, but learn on your own. Be curious.
That's a wrap. Big thanks to Carl Fremont for bringing the wisdom and reminding us that marketing isn't just acronyms and dashboards. It's about, actual strategy. And of course, a huge shout out to our sponsors who keep this show running. Troutman, Amin. If you're in ad law and don't know them, are you even in ad law? Rembrandt.com. Because AI-generated creative shouldn't look like it was made by a caffeinated intern. Incremental.com. Helping brands figure out what's actually driving sales instead of just blaming the algorithm. Daily Motion. Streaming, monetization, and video that doesn't make you want to gouge your eyes out with bad pre-roll. Thanks for listening. Subscribe, share, or just yell about this episode on LinkedIn. See you next time.